Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US. We have Nathaniel Tafoya on board today. Nathaniel was born in 1980 and lived in California. He now resides in the state of Utah. His ET contact experiences started since the inception of conception into this world we call Earth or Terra. His contact experience started at the young age of 2 years old, where two grays materialized through his bedroom wall to check on him to see if he was adjusting to the Earth conditions. These experiences have followed him throughout his life and continues on as directed through his extraterrestrial slash extra-dimensional family contacts. Through his countless experiences, he has come into contact with many different entities, such as the mantid-type beings, tall white beings, greys, and other humanoid species. These contacts have brought forth many different types of experiences, ranging from physical encounters with the entities aboard their crafts, in his home, dream state contact experiences, telepathic downloads, and channeled information. Through them, many astonishing teachings were learned, and these ongoing experiences have also brought forth many challenges as well. His purpose is to bring forth a greater sense of reality and insights into humanity, a knowledge which has been withheld from us, as well as to help others that may need support throughout these encounters and experiences. So, Nathaniel, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Before we get into your story, because I know your contact started at a very young age, but are you aware if you have any pre-birth memories?
Um, you know, not to my recollection, but however, as my spirit and my soul, I feel like this is just one part of a major experience that I've been going through for a very long time. Um, as things progress in my life, as I get older and stuff, certain memories and stuff I become aware of that maybe I was not aware of. But as far as like preconception birth, I do know that I did pick my parents to be my parents in this physical form here on Earth. I know that for a fact. That's a resonant feeling that I do have within inside me. But as far as anything before then, I don't have any like a memory or anything like that that I can visualize that happened prior to.
So let's get into your childhood contacts. Could you talk about where you grew up and what exactly happened?
Yeah, I was born in January of 1980. I was born in Torrance, California, and my parents are originally from the state of Utah. Um, my dad had got a job opportunity with Xerox uh, company, and he moved to California, and that's where I was born. And I resided in Torrance for probably till about the age of maybe 3 years old, and then we moved to Orange County, California. Um, growing up there was a cool time for me because I basically, after I had gone through pre-K, which is preschool, we had moved to a part in Rancho Santa Margarita. But basically, where the story starts, where I had my first contact experience, was in our home in Torrance, California. Um, I used to, so if we want to start from there, basically, one of the most recalling visualization memories that I had in a physical contact experience was in the house in Torrance, California. And what took place there is I actually had my mother's mom visiting from Utah to our house location. She would come to California to come visit us every now and then. And I remember my mother and my grandma were hanging out in the kitchen, getting things prepared for dinner. And it's really hard to give you a time because we all know at the age of 2 years old, we don't have really a concept of time or anything like that. But it was later in the afternoon. And so what ended up happening is I was in my bedroom and I was playing with my toys. And I do have what's called a photographic memory. I have really severe dyslexia, and the way my brain works and I learn is through um, photographic memories and stuff like that. It really helps me be able to obtain information, and I'm always really hyper aware of my surroundings. But what took place was I was in my bedroom and I was playing with some toys, and all of a sudden, I had two gray extraterrestrials, or what I would refer to as more of a gray in appearance looking extraterrestrial that came in through my walls of my room. The best way that I could describe it so someone could visualize what I saw was if you were to ever be driving down the road on a really hot day and you can see the heat waves coming off the ground. That's kind of what took place with the walls of my room is I started to get that wave formation on the wall as they started to manifest in a physical form. It kind of just had this wave function, and then they started to come through the wall, and they weren't fully it was almost, how could I describe it? They were physically there, but almost in a sense of like a holographic type projection. They were still within the confines of that waveform around them, but they had came through, and I just, it was really weird. I can't really emphasize the concept of time being that young because we don't really get an understanding until we get older of what time was, but it was almost like everything just kind of, there was no outside noise that I can remember. I could not hear any form of conversations going on in the kitchen. And we grew up in quite of a small home in Torrance, California. It was a good starting point for my family. And so when they came through, I had a telepathic communication, and there was no auditory noise or conversations going on. It was pure telepathy. And they were coming in to check on me and see how I was doing. Again, being that young, I wasn't afraid because I didn't know any differently. I thought this was maybe a normal thing that took place amongst people, and I never shared this until way later on in my life with my mother and my father. But they were checking on me to see how I was doing, and during that time, um, they were letting me know that they were going to be with me for my whole life here on Earth, and that they would be visiting me more often as I became older, and that they immediately, when that happened, I felt this connection to them that I had known them for a very, very, very long time. That I almost felt more natural than being in the presence of my own mother and father at times, where I felt like they were family. So maybe I've I've talked to a few people that I've had the opportunity to do interviews with in the past. That one of my friends, Johnny Webb, was part of Dr. J Radio Live. He asked me if I felt as if I was a hybrid child, and it was a really odd uh, thing to say to me because I've never had someone say that before. I don't know, but what I do know is that they felt like family, and I knew they were going to be checking on me because that's what they emphasize with great importance. During that time, I was so excited. I went to the kitchen area. I asked them, first of all, back telepathically is I had someone special here visiting, and would it be okay if I could introduce my grandmother to them? They told me this specific telepathic message, which was a child's mind and consciousness is a lot greater than it is as an adult, so they might not see what you see. Now, it didn't really make sense when I was young. That, again, that message was relayed to me way later on as I became an adult. And the reason why they said this message is if we can all look back at our childhood history and see where we didn't develop blinders until we got older. We were open to this amazing experience of being in a physical form. As a child, we didn't develop our own limitations. We had the world at our hands, as we still do now, but we didn't have these preconceptions of what was okay to believe or not to believe. We all incarnated in this raw physical form to just be open to receive anything that was available to us. And part of consciousness in itself is what we must understand is consciousness is not limited to time, space, shape, or form, or thought. Thought is only directed by us in our perspective lens that we get to experience. So as soon as we start inheriting certain beliefs and stuff like that, then what happens is we start molding that foundation in our physical reality, in our emotional responses, and everything like that. So that message was really profound later on. So I said, okay, well, let me go grab, sorry to go back, but so I said, okay, well, let me go grab my grandmother. Well, I went into the kitchen, and it was almost as if there was a time distortion because they were at the stove, but it was almost like they were like paused for a second, like there was no motion between them, there was no conversation. And I come in there and I tap my grandmother on the shoulder and I said, Grandma, I want to introduce you to some friends of mine. And she looks at me and she looks at me weird and said, come on, they're in my room, I need to show you. So I grabbed her hand, I walked her into the room, and I said, do you see them right over here? They're right here where the wall is, just on the my crib was on the right side. And I said, I'd like to introduce you to them. She looks at me and she goes, well, where are they at? I said, they're right here and I can see them. But obviously she couldn't see them. And they she had bent down and looked at me and smiled, and she's like, you're a clever little boy. And she had walked out the room, and I watched her walk out the room, and the next thing I know is they were no longer there. So it's interesting looking at it now, and as I've had a chance to really digest a lot of things that have taken place in my life with the extraterrestrial, I really like to call them more of a interdimensional or transdimensional entity, because yes, they are extraterrestrials, but my deep down feeling inside is they're just not. I think it's misunderstood that we hear them that they're just from another star system. We have to look at dimensional layers. There's a lot of dimensional layers just within this Earth plane itself, and so that they can come from either a past or a future time here on Earth, and that they're also able to travel to different star systems. Within those time frames, they could be in a totally different dimension aspect. And that's how I really have come to understand that. But that's where that first took place with the first physical experience or encounter that I had. During that time, it was kind of weird because as I started to develop after that first conversation, probably within the next year, I don't remember having any type of interactions or anything like that. But what I did remember at about the age of 3 years old, I had this really complex thought process. During that time, I started to question if my parents were my true parents. And so I don't know many young children, 3 years old, not even my own children, that think like that. It was a really interesting time where, yes, I could see the physical resemblance of myself within my father and within my mother. And I knew that they were my parents, but I questioned if they were my real parents. And so it was something that I was thinking about a lot as a child during that 3 year old time, probably for a good, I don't know, probably several weeks to a month, I would think, as far as how I could perceive time now from back when I was there. It was really something that really was concerning to me, and I was trying to understand, and it's kind of a quite big thought process going on for such a young individual at the time. And so during that time, my parents decided to move to a place called Trabuco Canyon, which is Rose Canyon, California. And this is back behind the Saddleback Mountain Range. So I attended preschool in Torrance for a while. Then my dad's career at the time was going well. And I had my brother and two sisters living with me at the time. And I am the only child to my mother. My brother and two sisters have a different mother from my dad's prior marriage. And so I am the only child to my mom. And a funny story behind that, and it's something that I had talked to you about, was that my mother was never supposed to be able to give birth to any children based on her anatomy. She had a really difficult time having children, and she had tried and tried and was never able to conceive a child until myself. But I remember as a child, and she still tells me to this day, and I'm almost 45 now, is that she remembers being able to see her stomach and look inside her stomach and see me in her womb, and she knew exactly what I was going to look like before I was born. And I find it funny, and come to realize the more I've talked to my mother, I think it's different. I do have two amazing, I have four amazing parents. One is now deceased, but both my father and mother have this really unique spirit about them. As my mother, as a young child, she was able to astral travel all the time. She said she could always leave her body anytime and just go wherever she would like to. And she had talked to her mom about this, and her mom actually took her to a specialist because she said that she shouldn't be talking like this out loud because people would think she wasn't normal. And so, but that's something special to her. She has explained that she's had some experiences as well. My father is very intuitive, and he has also had an experience which I didn't know till later on in life. We'll discuss that as time goes on in my time frame as far as what has taken place in my life. But so what happened was we moved to Rose Canyon, California, and this is where I attended kindergarten at Trabuco Elementary. And from that point on forward is when things kind of started to progress. So there was, from the time of two where it first started, and then the three with the contemplation, By about the age of 4 and 5 was when things started to happen again for me. During my time in kindergarten, I was having these really profound dreams, and I still do to this day. One of my favorite all-time childhood movies and toys that I owned was E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the movie by Steven Spielberg. My mother had purchased a E.T. doll that was made of leather, and inside that doll it had sand in there. And so I would carry that with me everywhere I went. I would sleep with it. It would break open when I would sleep with it in bed, so I'd have sand all in my bed, and my mom would put sand back in and sew it back up so I could have it. It was my favorite thing. Then I started to have the physical experiences. And I wanted nothing to do with that doll anymore. I did not want anything to do with it. Can I say that my experiences with extraterrestrials were all fun and joy? They were very difficult, very, very difficult, because I started to become scared. If you can only imagine what it would be like to be surrounded in your bedroom with 3 to 5 gray extraterrestrial beings surrounding your bed late at night, it's not the most comfortable experience that you could imagine. So this stuff was taking place when I was in kindergarten and moving on throughout my life. And so my mom's like, "Wow, why don't you like having your ET doll anymore?" I'm like, I just don't want it around me anymore. And I didn't have any reference or anything like that. In the 80s, we didn't we used rabbit ears for our TV. There was limited programming. There was nothing really to watch. I think there might have been unsolved mysteries, but I was watching cartoons. I was playing with my toys. I didn't have any reference to what I was experiencing. There was no things that I could see that would create this imaginary figure that I might have been seeing at night. This was real physical contact that was taking place. And so how my events would take place is I would pretty much most of the events would always take place at nighttime. I would have daytime events, but they weren't with physical entities. They were with craft in the sky, maybe a metallic cigar-shaped object in the sky, or a saucer-type craft, or a lot of people may be aware of what are called the black triangles. But I would definitely see those as a child, and a lot of it was dream state contact during the first part, and then it became more physical as I started to get older. But at the age of 5, I would always be woken up, be alerted in my sleep. Like I would hear this telepathic communication saying it's time to wake up, it's time to go. And as soon as I would open up my eyes, when I would hear that message, I would have 3 to 5 extraterrestrial entities, mainly the grays, surrounding me in my bedroom. And they would come really close to my face and look at me in my eyes, and I would freeze up, and I would I would get panicked. Even as a child, I just would freeze up, and the next thing I know is I would black out. And so I don't know what would take place during that point in time. Once I blacked out, I didn't know how I got from my bedroom to the craft, and I've been in the craft several times. What I can tell you about being in the craft is it's quite amazing. If you were to ever be able to experience, and maybe some of your audience members and other interviewers can relate to this, but what you see with the physical eye as far as the shape of the craft is completely different from the interior of the craft. So the craft could be 50 feet in length, maybe more, maybe less. But once you get inside, it's so big. I can't even describe, like, you don't get a reference of space. I don't know if it's a distortion that the craft makes or whatnot. I can't explain it, but the craft is huge inside. And it's very sterile looking for the most part. And so I would be brought onto the craft to be learning things as a young child. So for me, I was guided by these gray extraterrestrial entities. And I referred to those gray extraterrestrial entities as almost like a worker bee. They weren't my main point of they were initiated in the contact experience by taking me aboard the craft, doing certain tasks that the main contact source on the craft would give me. A lot of the interactions were with tall gray or tall whites individuals. And it's hard to kind of identify what they look like. They are very tall in stature. They almost have a translucent type appearance, sort of. And their hair is long, stringy, and almost clear. Really blue eyes, some pink. And I would always have a direct contact source with them, either male or female or both. And the grays would be there to help assist in whatever they had for me. If it was taking me to a different part of the craft to learn something, or later on in my adolescent years into diving more into my physical anatomy, which we're all kind of maybe familiar with some abduction experiences, which I really don't like to use the word abduction. I find it kind of abrasive. But when I was young, they would take me into different parts of the craft, and it was almost like a school. They would put me in front of what I would refer to as some type of holographic type screen, and I would be shown symbols. These symbols were a form of language, but within that symbol, it wasn't just a word, it was a full, how can I say, a whole broad spectrum of information within the symbol. It taught me about um, the creation of the human species on Earth. It talked to me about, it showed me things about different events that could possibly take in effect with natural disasters, wars, and stuff like that. So a lot of different information. A lot of it was, I've always been really intuitive. I've been really empathic, feeling people's energies, and so they help me enhance these already natural abilities that I kind of have, but it was a broader spectrum as far as how to be able to be aware of open telepathic communication. And I think a lot of people don't have a clear understanding of, well, how does telepathy work, or what is it? Each and every human being is telepathic in nature. The thing about it is we're in a system where especially in our school systems and stuff like that, that we do not look at some of the innate gifts that we're all brought into this world. So each and every one of us has the ability to have telepathic communication. And more empathy as far as feeling energetic energies and stuff like that. I'm no less special than anybody else. However, I think other individuals may have a easier time accessing these things with practice, and so how telepathy works and how they taught me and explained to me as it's the most transparent way of communication because it's through feeling. Sometimes telepathy could be in what we have come to know and what I've come to know, and I just heard of the term downloads. Like I never thought of it as like a download or these how we like to categorize certain labels and stuff like that. But I'd always get information sent to me. And so telepathic communication could be in a form of download. It could be automatic writing skills. It could be a form of just confirmation, almost like intuition, where you have this gut feeling or instinct. A lot of communication is like if you've ever tried to say your name without using any tone, any voice, just close your mouth and you say your name, you can hear that inside. And so telepathic communication can occur that way as well. It could be something that you feel, and then as the feeling comes out, then you can understand what that feeling is within a verbalization context that you can perceive. So there's many forms of telepathic communication. Also, a lot of the teachings were about my ability to perceive energies. And one of my gifts, which is really special to me, is within the first 5 minutes of knowing someone, I can know their true character as the person who they are. It sucks, but yes, it's good in a lot of ways. It's really helped me to be aware of someone's innate nature. Some are more service to others than service to self. I can get a good understanding as far as what they're wanting. I can definitely, the lie detector thing really is really easy to see. But yes, I'm very observant. I'm always aware of people's true intentions. I can feel the energy from them immediately, especially going into places that I've worked at. Like I've had almost a precognition of knowing something has taken place, but at the same instance, it does affect me and it does drain my battery sometimes too, of being really sensitive to energy. So I do get drained, especially with negative energies or surroundings. It really does affect me. But they had helped me be able to understand these already occurring gifts within myself, but to a greater degree of understanding. They also did talk to me about basically their role here on this planet, especially the mantids. And so the mantid entities, I almost refer to them as what I would refer to as like an overseer. Very intelligent. They have a greater, all of them are super, way beyond human intelligence and understanding. But the most important thing they ever always have expressed to me was the importance of feeling. Feeling is everything because once we feel, then we can use that feeling into our physical expressions and to be aware of our intentions and the way we choose to communicate. We have to be very aware of the things that we think, we feel, and how we choose to respond because one important message was is everything has a ripple effect and bleed through effect. And what that means is if we have a certain intention involved, or an idea, and my definition of the idea of what an idea is an intention directed in an energetic action idea. And so basically, when we have a certain intention and we carry that through, what happens is there's a ripple effect and bleed through. So not only does it affect us here in our physical form, but it is also felt dimensionally in other dimensions. So everything that we do and experience and our emotions and feelings and how we direct things, it's also being felt in other areas, and they can pick these things up as well, which is really important to understand. And I don't know if it's ever been emphasized before, but I feel that is necessary to bring up during this time. And so these things were all being taught to me at such a young age. When we had moved from Rancho Santa Margarita, my parents decided to build a really big, elaborate home. I used to always get upset with my dad because he was a workaholic and the materialistic things were so important to him. And I said, you know, you need to spend more time with your family, because he would always be traveling all the time. He was so devoted into making money, having this materialistic thing happening around him. I know that's not who he is now, and I think there's a more appreciation towards that, especially me being a father of two children. I understand that we're all in this grind of trying to provide for our families. There's certain materialistic things that we're attracted to, and we want to be able to have that temporary experience of having a certain item or something like that. What I've come to understand, though, as I've gotten older, is material possessions are just temporary experiences that we pay for to experience. But in the end, when we depart from here, those material objects always stay here. They may get inherited by children, grandchildren, or whatnot, and they may not see the value of what you saw within that item. So I've come to appreciate more of just what I have is my experiences, what I can do with my experiences, and how I can shape and mold them to be of service to others. Because when I give more, I also receive more from the other individual. And that is a important thing that they have taught me within my childhood and throughout my life. But my parents built this big, really big, elaborate home. And so it was kind of an uncomfortable environment, because it was like, as a child, I have to be careful. I don't want to ruin the furniture. I can't touch things and have fun. I mean, it was a really extravagant home, and it was fun. But where my parents decided to build the home was back behind the Saddleback Mountain Range. And during that time, there's not a lot of development out there still. And so we had this big, huge mountain range that's back behind the Cleveland National Forest. I had myself, my friend Tom Parsons, who's now a X Game motocross best whip rider, and I had a couple other friends that we always grew up riding motorcycles and stuff, which I was very fortunate to have as a kid. And so that was our thing. We just had a bunch of mountains and trails, and we would have to drive up into the valley to go to school. So it was very isolated from the normal city area. During that time, I had my two sisters living with me, and my brother had moved out of the house because he lived with us in Torrance, California, and decided to go back to Utah to be with his mother and be with a girl. But during that time, that's when things really started to change in my life, where physical contact experiences were happening really regularly, quite often, sometimes several times within a week, consistently for several weeks. Sometimes there would be a pause and delay. And that was starting about from, let's see, kindergarten was about 5, so about 6 and 7 years old. In fact, in 1987, I remember my mom was in the house downstairs, and I had walked down the stairs, and she was sitting on the couch reading a book. And in her hand was the book Communion by Whitley Strieber. And I walked down the stairs and I got really upset with her. I said, "Mom, I don't want that book in this house." She goes, "What is the matter with you?" I said, "I do not like what's on the cover." She goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "What's on your book? I want it out of the house now." And she's like, "You're being so angry. I said, "I don't want it in the house. Get rid of it." She's like, "All right, I'll get rid of it." Well, she would just hide it with amongst her other books and I would find it. And I said, "You told me you would get rid of this book." And so she had sat me down on the couch and I was 7. And she's like, "Why are you so upset with this book? Why does this book make you so upset?" I said, "It's what's on the cover." And she goes, "Well, why?" She's like, it's just a figure." And I said, "No, because they keep coming at night and coming into my room, visiting me." And this is the first time I ever explained anything to my parents. I didn't ever really explain anything. I didn't know how to put things into words. And even at that time, at 7, it was still really difficult for me to explain what was taking place. So she had asked me, she's like, "Well, why do they keep taking you?" And I said, "I don't know, but they keep visiting me at night," because I had memory blocks of what was taking place a lot of the time. One thing that I've known during these physical contact experiences, it's very difficult because interacting with other entities, their vibration or energetic vibration is not even matched to ours. So for my personal experience, and I can only tell from my experiences, is that it was like experiencing every emotion and feeling you could experience all at one moment when you're in their physical presence. It's really overwhelming. You get this huge anxiety and almost flight or fight response feeling, and you're excited, you're happy, but you're terrified. And I experienced that a lot of times. And so it's really difficult. And even in fact, to this very day, I catch myself putting my covers of my own comforter, and I'm a almost 45-year-old man, covering my face at night because so many visitations would occur where I'd be surrounded at nighttime in my bedroom, and I would have entities surrounding me, getting me ready to go aboard the craft, or even sometimes having events happening in my room. And so it's very unsettling. It's very hard to deal with. And so that's the truth of the nature, is it's very difficult. It's very challenging. Is my life threatened by it? No, not at all. Have I ever been harmed in any way by them? Not at all. But to actually go through the physical experience of being with entities, I get goosebumps, I get anxiety, I get nervous, and especially being sensitive to energies. I know when things are going to happen. I can feel them before they start to occur. I can feel the difference in the energy in the room and when things happen. And so, naturally, being sensitive to these things and energies, it's very challenging for myself. But it's always had a positive outcome towards it, even though it's very challenging and difficult to endure during the time. So, she asked me why they would come and visit. I just said they keep coming to visit me. Well, what I come to understand and know from the time I was 7 all the way until I was 15, my body was changing. My body was developing more into the adolescent times. That's when I'd be taken from my room. I would notice certain marks on my skin, almost like blood vessels popping on my arms. I would notice little marks by my wrist area that would be there for a few days and then they would go away. I noticed that when I got into my adolescent time frame, that I was having uh, semen taken from my body, which is, it's hard to talk about because this is where people think that they're doing harm in doing this. One thing that Grant Cameron, I had the opportunity of talking to him about and hearing from him, which I never knew. And it took me a long time to realize my blood type. I have a negative blood type. And apparently, if you have a negative blood type, it tends to be more prevalent in experiencers and people that have had abduction experiences, that they see more people with negative blood types having experiences with entities and stuff like that. That being, maybe there is and it's not a common, any type of person that has a negative blood type, it's a rare blood type for the human species. Um, Again, I also have really bad dyslexia. That is another thing. Uh, if someone has some form of learning disability, they are more sensitive and more open to contact experiences because they perceive reality somewhat differently than someone that may not have dyslexia or ADHD or ADD and the list goes on. So our attention and the way we perceive things are altered in a certain state that someone that may not have that be able to experience. And so it was really hard when I was getting my anatomy checked out and stuff like that. Was it invasive? Yeah, kind of. It was a little bit invasive. But again, I can't recall every pinpoint exact event that would take place. And I think they do this where they put blocks during this experience because there's so much of what we as human beings are able to experience energetically with the other entity. It'd almost be like an overdrive or an overload for our physical body to handle those situations. So maybe it's a form of like anesthesia in a sense, where they will only allow you to undergo so much and retain so much information during that time. There is one contact experience. So we'll go back to after 7. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping. But at the age of 7, when I had talked to my mom, a few days later, she had bought me a book. It's called The Boy from the UFO. And it was really weird to be able to receive that book from my mom. And when I look at it now, I'm like, why? Like, I would never give my child a book like that. Maybe I would if they were talking to me about if they've had experiences, which I've asked my children. They want to see them and they want to experience them, but I don't think they really have yet. And maybe they will, maybe they won't, and maybe it will be with their children or their children's children. I don't know. But so I received that book and I started to read it. And reading for myself is very challenging with having dyslexia. I see things very differently, so words get jumbled up. I skip the lines. I sometimes read things backwards and everything. And so, but there was a part in the book that explained that this boy would always get this tingling sensation and goosebumps running through his body every time that this UFO would come in to check on him. And he would have these experiences. And as soon as I read that, I started to feel what the author was explaining in the story as if it was always happening with my experiences, because I would feel the same way. I just get this electric shock, almost like as if like your hands and legs fall asleep, but it's your whole body. And I would just get completely overwhelmed. And so I started to read that book a little bit, but it was really challenging for me. And during that time, my parents saw me struggling in school so much because of my dyslexia. I was having a really hard time. I was being taken to learning centers. I had a doctor try to gain a understanding of my dyslexia where they were even prescribing me bifocals to try to help me out, and they did this whole visual spectrum thing to see my chart, how my eyes would work and everything like that. And so it was a really weird stage in my life. Like, I always felt really like I had a special purpose and I was here and I was meant to do something very special. But also at the same token, I always felt different. I always felt like I didn't fit in. However, I always would attract people to me. Like, people, even to this day, I have people that always are attracted to me. They always want to share something personal about what's going on with them, and like deep personal things that they would not normally share with maybe family members or friends. Like, there's a lot of people that gravitate towards my way in some way, shape, or form. Um, and so I feel like there's a greater purpose behind why I'm here in this temporary human experience. So maybe this is a bigger plot to my story and just a bigger plot into helping others. And so during those adolescent time frames, the physical experience became way more physical in the adolescent areas where they were visiting me. Semen was taken from me. In fact, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but it was almost like I was having intercourse with another entity of some sort, female. Um, yeah, yeah, it's very difficult, and yeah, might as well lay it out. So, but yeah, that took place, and in fact, um, when I was about 15 years old is when I met my first girlfriend, and this is before I had my driver's license or anything like that. And so we would visit each other. Her parents would bring her over to my house, or we would meet up at the mall or go to the beach. Or a lot of the times we would just talk on the phone for a long time. And I think I had sent you an illustration a while ago about 3 extraterrestrial entities coming through the door area of my room. And if you look behind the door, there's a me hiding behind the door. And so let me explain that encounter. And so when I drew that drawing, I've never drawn any drawings of my experiences or anything like that. It was I was given an opportunity to do an interview on the Dr. J Radio live show, which he's not really consistent anymore. But so he asked me if I could do some drawings and stuff like that. And so I illustrated that drawing of that experience, and it was really hard for me. But one night, her and I were talking on the phone really late. I don't know what year the song Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden came out, but that was about the time frame where I was listening to that song quite a bit and in that generation of music. And so we were talking late one night, and where my parents built this house, we had it on a 2.5 acre lot. And so my parents would have horses on their pasture and stables and a corral where they could roam around in a pasture. And my friend's house, he actually moved to Florida, but he used to have horses, and we all used to ride our motorcycles, and we used to play hide and go seek on our motorcycles and just build jumps and go around the trails and stuff like that. But I was talking to her, and it was about, I'd say, 12 o'clock at night, midnight. We would talk for hours on end on the phone, and sometimes we'd fall asleep while being on the phone just because we'd be talking for hours. And I remember it was really late in the evening, and I said, "Can you hold on real quick? I think I hear my friends coming up on their motorcycles to come up to my house." And she didn't respond back to me over the phone. It was almost as if she had fell asleep. But I had thought I had heard motorcycles coming up. So I said, "Hold on real quick. I'll be right back." And she didn't respond back to me. But what ended up happening is I set the phone down on the bed. I got off the bed and I started walking to my front door. I always kept my door closed because this is my teenage years. This is where I was starting to get into a little bit of trouble, doing bad things with some of my friends being a teenager. But so I thought they were coming up to visit me, and I thought I could hear the motorcycles coming up behind the hill to come up to my house area. So I got up off the bed, sat the phone down, and started walking towards the door. The noise of the motorcycles weren't increasing. And as I started getting closer to the door, I could hear this very low pitch hum. And it was really deep inside the air, almost so faint you could barely hear it. But motorcycles didn't get any louder. I went to grab the handle to my door, and my door handle is not a round handle. It had like a hook on that you would grab and press down on. Well, I go to put my hand on the handle, and the handle starts moving on its own. And as that happens, the way my room was built up, where my closet was, I had this little, like, kind of quarter shaped moon, like rounded out part where if when I was younger, when my friends would come over to the house, we'd play hide and go seek. I could hide behind my door and open it all the way, and I could fit in where my door would open all the way, so it would look like it was all the way open, touching the wall, but I could fit my body through there. Well, as the door started to open up, I saw these 4 long fingers start grabbing the door and pulling it open. And my automatic reaction, as soon as that I saw the door crack open and I saw the fingers grab, as I hid right there as the door opened up, and I could see the door opening up further, and I could see these 3 entities walking in through my room. Now, granted, most of all my contact experiences was taking place while I was asleep. This didn't happen that way. And so I think maybe they were trying to get my attention to come out and have me in their presence aboard the craft by getting me out and doing things differently this time, where this was terrifying for me because as I see the door opening up, I freeze up and I lock and I can't move. I'm like paralyzed and I'm just sitting like this upright in between the door. And they start to come in my room and I try to scream as loud as I can, like really loud scream. And my parents were divorced, so it was just my father and I in this big house. And I had screamed up at the top of my lungs, but no sound came out of my voice whatsoever. And one entity put both of his hands on my shoulders right here, and I had tried to push to resist. I couldn't do anything, and I felt them coming closer to me, like to embrace me. And the weird thing about it is, where my back was against the wall, I could no longer feel any solid object behind my back, almost as if the wall had disappeared or opened up. And so I remember trying to scream and I couldn't move, and they got closer. And then the next thing I remember is I am sitting upright in my bed. I am sweating profusely, and I have pins and needles throughout my whole body, like my body was asleep. My phone is, I looked for my phone. My phone is now down on the bed, hung up, and 3 hours have passed in time, which only I remember everything happening from the point in time from when I got up to my off my bed to walk to the door, and the hands grabbing the door and opening up the door as the three came in, and trying to scream and being held and not being able to move, to waking up sitting upright in my bed, sweating profusely with pins and needles everywhere. It seemed like 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, but there was a 3 hour gap in time. And so as soon as that happened, where I had regained consciousness and sitting upright in my bed, it was weird because if you're asleep, you usually open up your eyes and then you get up. But I was already sitting upright in my bed, which, and I remember walking there. And so as soon as that happened, I was freaked out. I was like really in shock, and my body was like fully charged. And maybe that's because I went through this how can I describe it? Not being like teleported, but like I went through a phasing phase or a shift in dimension where I was in my room and they took me on craft. It was really different because I was not being like necessarily like led to walk towards the craft or exiting from my house. Like I think they had transported me into their ship from my room, because they don't need to, just as I experienced at the age of 2, how they can materialize and phase in through a wall. They can do the same with getting us to an area. And so as soon as I woke up, I turned on all the lights in my room. I turned on my TV, my regular Nintendo, my stereo, because I was freaked out because I knew what took place. And it took me a good 20 minutes to gain composure, even enough to fall back asleep, Well, I fell asleep with my lights on and my stuff on, and as soon as I went to sleep, I was in this dream state contact where it was really weird. It was almost like I was underground somewhere. I was deep underground, and I see this light encompass this tunnel and go straight there. And all of a sudden, I'm in face with the main source of contact, which is a tall white entity. And it says to me telepathically in my dream state contact, and this happened as soon as I fell asleep right away. And it says to me, "We're really sorry that you got startled and frightened like this," because I was shook up. But they said, "We wanted to let you know that we'll always be with you, but your physical contact is not going to be something that happens as often as it has been. And we'll still have a physical interaction with you in due time." But what they emphasized was that they really wanted me to digest everything that was happening to me, because you got to understand that from the age of 2 all the way to adolescence age of about 15, there's a long time frame that takes place, and this is where my peripheral and my perspective blindfolds are starting to come in. That child's mind of consciousness that I had mentioned earlier was starting to change. And so they said, "We need you to take time to digest and take these things that have happened, so that way you can better apply it in your life as you become an adult." And so what took place, it was really hard because I remember everything leading up to that. And then it became stagnant with the physical interactions. I was having them all the time as a kid. I was being taken aboard the craft to learn things about telepathy, about being more understanding about the energies around me and being aware of things. Taught me about looking at the screens with the symbols that would allow me to see different events that were possibilities of taking place with natural disasters, climate change, um, just being more in tuned. And then the whole adolescent stuff with having my physical anatomy being looked at and having semen taken away, um, probably for the purpose of using for a hybrid child or children. Do I find it abrasive in that manner? Not really. I could if I chose to do that, but I've had a lot of time to digest and understand things that have taken place, and so I look at it as, yes, I may have this blood type that's rare, and it works with them using my DNA to help generate a offspring or a new species to um, be able to learn and grow as well. Because within these experiences within themselves, I know a lot of people, and I tried to distance myself away from watching things about UFOs and alien abductions and stuff like that, because I don't want to adapt another person's experience and use that within my own at all. But I also am intrigued and interested in hearing someone else's experiences, because all of our experiences differ in a lot of way. Um, so that being said, is I've noticed that there's a lot of people saying YouTube and stuff like that that like to comment and say these are demons and they're negative and evil and they have an evil intent. Let me just emphasize this with great importance and just allow the audience to be aware of this. God has many houses in his kingdom. And so when we come to understand that these entities that help procreate planets are in service to God and his creation, because the human body is just a vessel, or another word, a container for a spirit or a soul to inhabit, to experience this dimensional plane on Earth. And so, that being said, to have a body and a physical form that is aware consciously of awareness and expression and can navigate and create and be able to experience what it's like to be in a physical form allows source energy, if you want to call it source, God consciousness, to come through, because we are all connected as one with the extraterrestrials, transdimensional entities, with source itself, God, through Christ. We are all part of one consciousness. And so, in order for God or consciousness to experience itself, it has to fractal itself off and splinter itself off to be able to experience its own creation. So that being said, is these entities that help seed other planets and help do things are in service to the greater whole of a physical existence and spiritual existence and understanding. In fact, if anything, I have gained a greater relationship with Source or God or Christ through them. They've helped me understand that I'm not just merely this human vessel experiencing itself as Nathaniel or Nathan. I'm much more than that name that is given to me, and I've always been in existence. And so, that being said, as when they told me that they wouldn't be in my physical presence as often, but they would always be with me and I would still have physical interactions with them, allowed me to have this greater understanding now in my present time. Because I could have went down the path of saying these are entities that are all negative and they're here to harm us and do wrong. I've experienced some tough things and it's not been easy. I do, even as an adult, sometimes being in my own home, that I feel uneasy walking up the stairs with no one behind me. Like I feel as if there's a presence behind me at times. I see shadow people or shadow entities a lot of the time. I experience lights in the sky that come down. I experience dream state contacts where they feel so physically real, but I'm in a dream state. I've had outer body experiences that have been taken place and taken on in my life, and it's been quite a wild ride. And I have so much gratitude, and I'm very lucky to be able to have the opportunity to come on this show today and share this with you. And that's just a small glimpse as to some of the experiences that I've had. in the physical form. I was never brought up into a religion or anything in my family. I had the freedom to choose my beliefs, and I didn't ask for these experiences to come in. They just are natural. They have always been in my life. They are very important to me. They are very important for me to be able to share and give insight and a greater understanding to people that I am in contact with, not just with relationships. And it doesn't have to be emphasized in, oh, well, I'm an extraterrestrial contactee and I have experiences happening throughout my whole life. But the greatest lesson I've learned is how we all contribute to the greater whole of being able to get closer to that omnipresent consciousness that we are all a part of. And so during that time where I had a chance, and even still to this day, to digest things and understand things, it's allowed me to be able to be more open to things and look at what they've taught me and how I can apply that in my daily life. I remember as a teenager trying to find some outlet, and I had a hard time explaining this to my parents or even I never had someone to be able to have some common ground to just communicate openly about what I was going through. I remember telling my friends, hey, I was taken from my room. I had extraterrestrials coming up to me. I got ridiculed. I got laughed at by my friends saying, you're full of garbage, you know? And so it caused me for a long time to keep that in. And I don't think it's fair for me to bottle up that inside to not share. I'm not embarrassed. I know the consequences of me explaining this. I've experienced negative criticism from others and comments on YouTube, and that's fine. I understand everybody has their own perspective lens and they're willing to believe as they choose so, and that's the beauty of being a human being and having the free enterprise of being able to believe your own beliefs. Um, my purpose here is not to convince you of anything. It's more to allow you to use discernment and understanding of that there is a greater presence than just what we're experiencing here with interacting with each other on the planet, but we are also being interacted with other entities. Some could say angels, some could say uh, extraterrestrial entities, extra dimensional entities. The list could go on and on. But we're not the only species living a life, and we are all doing things simultaneously in an omnipresent state, happening all at one point in time. And it's happening now. And the important thing to understand right now, as we're starting to share this, is we're in a time frame right now where the earth is going through a big transformational shift in energy, in consciousness. There are people that are becoming more aware of their innate abilities and their true nature. People are now finding that the extraterrestrial presence, UFOs are the new terminology, UAPs, are now a thing that is being talked to about, which was now once ridiculed. I want everybody to be very aware of the information that is being presented through the media, what is going to be told by the governments about what's happening here. And in fact, if anybody's been watching this, you can hear the sense that they're using the term could be a possible threat to national security for the state of, or the United States of America, also other countries. Just know that this agenda that we're going to be able to witness here, especially as we start progressing in time now, that they're going to use these things in a way of control, maybe possibly manipulation for a lot of people. And so, what I would really encourage everybody to understand that each and every one of us that have had experiences and that are having experiences, we are the disclosure movement. We have been brought forth at this very present time right now to not just share our stories through a media platform, but that we have a great gift and opportunity to help move consciousness, people that are in a different mindset, just not to convince them, but just based on our actions alone. What we choose to do and what we've learned from these experiences, may it be positive or negative, always look that they're in the negative experience, there's also a positive outcome that comes through this. So it's very important that we all come together, especially now, and start working forward in propelling this new understanding and this new way into the world that is needing to be birthed, because everything is starting to come to the surface now. And so I would implore each and every one of you experiencers to work together, work with humanity, work with others to be of service, to show that we can be more omnipresent and more symbiotic with our planet, with our fellow friends and families and members here on earth that we share this wonderful experience with, because we are in servitude of source to be able to come together. And this is one important message and teaching that has always been true to all of my contact experiences, is to unify, come together, stop labeling, segregating people, stop doing harm to the planet, because what we do harm to the planet also affects other dimensions. Like I said, the bleed through and ripple effect is very real. If you do not believe that other forms of life or intelligence or extraterrestrials or dimensional entities exist, just go ahead and go to your bathroom, look in front of the mirror, and look at yourself. And know that you're not alone. There is more to you and more to others out there. And I think it's very important that we understand that. So that is basically kind of where I've come to a conclusion and understanding, and things just keep unfolding rapidly within my life with this extraterrestrial contact experience. I didn't know if you wanted to share the video or anything like that that I had sent you, or some of the images,
Yeah,
but
I've got a few questions before that.
yes.
And thank you for the story here. It's an amazing one so far. It's a beautiful one. I believe your father's an experiencer, possibly?
Um, so when I was, let's say, 36 years old, my wife and I had went over to my dad's house uh, here up in Utah. He had purchased a company, and we went to come visit and have dinner with him. My son was just barely born. He was a baby, and we were sitting down watching a basketball game on TV. And see, my wife does not, it doesn't really have a belief system in the extraterrestrial presence. In fact, when I share these things, she doesn't. It's really hard to be able to be fully open and have my even partner be able to be on my side with this. She says, oh, you got to be careful on what you say to the kids. They don't need to know this stuff. And I said, well, if I'm not being authentic and true to myself, and I'm not being truthful to my children, what happens in the case of if something happens to them? Who are they going to turn to when they need help? Because I didn't have that really. I had it with my mom a little bit, and not until I was about 36 with my dad. We were having a conversation as we were watching the basketball game, and I said, Dad, can I ask you a question? And this is the first time I ever told my dad anything. I said, did anything ever weird happen to you at the house? Because the house that we built, where I had a lot of the extraterrestrial contact experience, it also had just a lot of paranormal experience. We had built this, we had bought land on this piece of property and built this house. Well, I think that there was, it's called Trabuco Canyon, and Trabuco is a old rifle, and this canyon had a lot of Native American presence on there. And so I had asked him, I said, you have any weird experience at this house? Because we would have uh, a female ghost that was in our house, and from the Victorian time frame. And she would walk around the house. We would have cabinets opening and closing at night. Weird events, and every one of my siblings and my family had experienced this female presence in the house. And I said, I'm not talking about the ghost stuff, Dad. I said, I'm talking about extraterrestrials. Have you ever had any experience with anything like that? And this is the first time I ever said anything. I said, because I've had this throughout my whole life, from the time we were in Torrance to the time we lived in the house in Trabuco Canyon into this present time. And he goes, this is the first time I ever said anything to my dad. He goes, in fact, I had been taken aboard a craft. And he said he encountered a female entity that he remembers laying on the table in the craft. And during that time, he said, she said everything would be fine. She just wanted to know more about him. And he said that they came from his balcony into his room, and he was aboard the craft. Now, I don't know if these two things correlate with one another, but this was shortly after the time where I was 15, where I was taken from my room and I woke up in my bed with my girlfriend. I had woken up in the middle of the night, and out my window, I saw a black triangle craft, what I would assume would be a black triangle craft in the sky, just hovering maybe about 75 yards from my window. And it was just hovering there. There were three bright white lights in a triangle formation, just sitting, hovering right there. No sound or anything like that. And I don't know what caused me to wake up. I don't know if maybe I had just got done having an experience and then I came to a waking state for a moment. But I was laying on my side in my bed, and I noticed this craft right outside my window. And I'm just staring at it. And I wish to this day, and I had messaged you about this, and I said, man, I wish I would have just got off my bed and walked outside and had the courage to go out there and see what was happening. The other instance it could be is maybe that could have been the point in time where my dad was aboard the craft. I don't know. And it was there hovering in my window for several minutes. And as I saw it, it finally started to rotate in a clockwise rotation and slowly started to move across my window. And I could definitely tell it was a black triangle craft at that point because I could see when it started to spin, the lights on the craft started to slightly bring out the silhouette of the craft itself to where it was definitely a black triangle. Um, it was very thin, but it was big enough. It was probably about as thick as a normal room from floor to ceiling as far as thickness went, and it was probably about maybe 75 feet long. And I saw it slowly started to spin away, and it went away. But I had asked my dad that question, and he said he did have an experience. My mother also had an experience where she had an entity come in her room at one point in a place in Utah, and she said this is in Interlochen, which is in Midway, Utah, just a little further south from Heber, Utah. She had southwest from Utah. I mean Heber, and she said that she had an entity that was in her room that was really tall, where she referred to him as a male, that his head was almost hitting the ceiling, so very tall, and asked if he could lay with her beside her in her bed. And she said that was okay. And she had mentioned that he asked for her hand. And so she laid, while she was laying on the bed, she let the male entity hold her hand, and they just laid there and had a conversation. I don't know of what conversation, and my mother doesn't recall, but she just said that he wanted to lay beside her and and, and talk to her, I guess. And so my mom's seen a UFO craft up at the log cabin that she has, just randomly here and there, but not too. She did mention that when my father passed away, that she had some experiences with some entities coming in her room that were negative, and she was warning me like to be careful. And I said, uh, I think she was watching like ancient alien shows, and I just said, they're not here to harm you, and if you were, you're gonna be okay. And always make sure to ground yourself. So yeah, my father and mother did have a little bit of conversations.
We talked about the tall whites, the grays, but you've sent me an image also about the Pleiadians, or what you think they might be Nordics. Can you talk about your interactions with them?
Yeah, they're very limited. In fact, I had an experience with a female Nordic, or what you would refer to a Pleiadian type entity, um, where I was sitting on the back patio of my backyard of my current home, and I was just hanging out in the daylight and just enjoying just outside and listening to the birds and hanging out. And all of a sudden, I had a Palladian female, um, not her whole body, but just her face, um, come into play and looked at me and talked to me. And later on, uh, she shared an information, and this was before my daughter was born. And she just during this time, I think it was what 2017 or 18 is when this took place, because my daughter was born in 2019. So I was having a lot of things happen. In fact, my first radio presence or YouTube presence, which most of all of my videos are all taking off on YouTube because of some of the people that I did interviews with. I took all their information down on their YouTube site or channel and stuff like that, which is kind of a shame because I had some really good information there for people to access. But I would, there's a YouTube party named Third Phase of Moon. I don't know if you've heard them before, but this is how I got started onto it. They used to do a Friday night call-in line, and so they would do their live show on YouTube, and they listed their number on YouTube where you could call in live. And so I'm sitting out on the back patio at night, and I decided to do the call-in line so I could actually hear what was going on live. And so what happened was I was listening, and all of a sudden I get picked. I get picked to to talk live, and I'm like, oh man, okay, I guess it's time. Well, I wasn't expecting to get picked at all. I didn't know how it would work or anything. I just thought you could listen to people's conversation all on the phone while they're having the show. And so I got picked, but during that time was the first starting point of me being open to the public about my experiences. And that led forth to knowing Dr. J, which was a co-host on his show. And then he had his own programming where I met Johnny Webb, which is the guy who asked me if I was a hybrid child. And then things just started to snowball. But that Pleiadian entity had came in for a reason, because I was having a lot of things happening to me with downloads, and I was getting things in where I was more focused on meditating, more focused on what maybe some people are familiar with CE5 protocol, with actually setting out an intention to bring forth craft or entities to come in. And so I felt that it was necessary that that I was being more open and in tune to this stuff that was happening. In fact, when I had my son in 2011, it took us my wife and I a while to conceive him. And it was interesting. And this doesn't really go with the Pleiadian that much, but what it does go with is I almost had a similar experience as my mom, saying that she could see through her stomach into her womb to see what I was going to look like. Well, with both of my children, I knew my son was going to be a boy, first off, foremost, for our first child. I knew that he was going to have blonde hair, blue eyes. And so when he was born, he came out with blonde hair, blue eyes. And this was just an intuition feeling that I had. And in 2019, we had our daughter, Olivia, and we had worked. It was also there, as you can tell, there's a quite big 8-year gap in between our kids. But during that time, this was right before the whole pandemic era took place. I was having a lot of contact experience, and in fact, when I would go to bed at night, I would get this tremendous amount of ringing in my ears, almost so much so, not like this high pitched noise, but to the point where I could feel my eardrums vibrating, and it was very intense. And then it would cause my body to vibrate, and I was having these experiences happen. In fact, during that time, I had an experience with a mantid that came in and was looking at me. I was asleep, but I could see it looking at me. And in fact, I feel like it was helping my body because I had gotten quite overweight. I My health wasn't as great as far as just being healthy and taking care of my body, and I think they were helping me be able to conceive another child during that time. Um, and so I had that interaction with the mantis entity. There was another time where I had the dream state contact where I was actually told I was on a break. I work for public transportation for the state of Utah, and I'm an instructor for bus operators and for public transportation. And I had a long break in between, and so I decided to come home from work and take a nap. And during the nap time, I was woken up by a telepathic voice saying, "Are you ready to go? It's time to go." And and it was a definitely a male voice, and it had a really pronounced tone to it, like it was really interesting. And I said, "I'm not ready to go right now." Um, I said, I can't be late back to work because I didn't know what what the time would be like or anything like that. So I declined going right there, then and there. Um, but yeah, I had that event take place. And then shortly after, I knew my daughter was going to have brown hair, brown eyes, and we had already picked out her name before we picked out our son's name. My wife and I picked on Olivia Ray as her name, and we had the boy, our son first. But she's really special. I didn't have as much opportunity with my son to um, be there as much like I am now with my daughter, where I have a work schedule where I could keep her home with me as she's growing up. And that's kind of our long delay in this interview process that we've had together. We wanted to do this a couple of years ago, and my commitment to raising my daughter, and now she's 5 now, so she's in school. So it's really nice to be able to give you my time and you make the time for me to come on. So yeah, it was a beautiful thing that, everything in timing, right? And so um, during that point in time where we found out that she was pregnant, I knew what she was going to look like and everything, and I broke down as soon as she came out into this world because I saw brown hair, brown eyes, and she is like the splitting image of myself. But yeah, just so many different experiences with what I guess we could elaborate on the Greys a little bit. We didn't really elaborate with them as much, but the Mantids are definitely overseers. I think they're involved in genetics, and for sure, from my experience, I believe they're also really involved in seeding of planets and life forms with flora and fauna and other planets. Um, and this is just based on the knowledge and experience and some of the things they taught me as a young child, and witnessing through this holographic display that was aboard the craft. Now, a lot of the times there was multiple different species aboard the craft, like mantises and grays working alongside. Same with tall whites. Occasionally, the Nordics or Pleiadian type entities as well. They would be involved with the species as well. I've had a very brief encounter with a reptilian type of entity. Um, this was different. In fact, so I this was a dream state contact, but I don't know how much of a dream it was because there's some things that I question as far as what are actually dreams or actually real contact experiences that I'm going through. Maybe in an astral level, but I remember running away from these reptilian entities, and it was almost like as if I was in some form of military or war in some fashion. But gravity was different, and so when I would jump, I would leap really far and have great distances in the air. And I remember getting caught by one of them and them staring me in the face. And then I woke up from the dream. I don't know what relation that has. Maybe that could be something from a past life situation. I don't know. But the Greys themselves, I've had some communication and interaction with them. Not as much as you would think. I think some of them are a organic type robotic life form that is that assists like certain entities that are aboard the craft that I have communication with, via it be the tall white, or maybe what I would refer to as a different form of a gray, not a smaller child type gray, but a larger gray. What I kind of refer to them as the wise grays. I think I sent an image of them with the Nordic and the one with the robe. Those are the ones that were gray, that were taller in stature, that came into my room with the hooded robes on. And but the smaller ones, I think they are there to assist the main contacts or the people that are in charge of the craft, because I think they are designed or made in a way that is they're more adaptable to come into this dimension frame, where maybe the other entities, maybe it be to our environment with gravity or exposure of things, that they're more suitable to come into our existence here and help with some of the contact experiences. But I have had some interactions with the smaller grays, not so much. In fact, those ones I kind of had to be careful with interacting with, because some of them I felt were very intrusive as far as the some of the DNA sampling and semen stuff. Like, I felt like they were like, yes, now I look at it and it's more positive. I was contributing to something greater. But during that time, it felt like I was just there as their specimen sample, I guess. And I didn't really get much of a teaching as much from them. It was more of, we're here, we need to do this. And I know that there's a greater purpose behind it. And so I just have been really careful on what now, since I've been more able to bring forth information and have these contact experiences, to be careful on what I'm allowing into my life. Like, I really set up ground rules, and when I make open contact of what I'm allowing in, because when you're allowing extraterrestrial entities to come in and you're doing CE5, you're also opening up a door for something even more than just extraterrestrial contact. There's other things that come. So this was an event that took place. My friend Matt Olson, which is one of my best friends from California, he's actually one of the people that he is the person that I had told him that I was taken from my room, and he laughed and thought I was full of garbage. And I told him, I said, okay, if you don't believe me, I said, one day you and I will be together and you're going to see something that I experienced. And I told him this. And so several years down the road, him and I went out to a private beach in Southern California, in Laguna Beach. And this is where my friend had a beach house for the summer. And so we were down at Aliso Creek in Aliso Viejo, California. It's just south of Laguna Beach, and we decided to go to, I'm like, let's go to this private beach and let's go hang out. So we drove the car down there and we went out, and that's a private beach house community where in the daytime they have a security guard, and unless you know a resident's there, you can only get in with the invitation from the resident. And so at nighttime, you can go on the beach and it's not guarded by security. So we went out there and we started walking down towards my friend's beach house, and all of a sudden this big mist comes out in the ocean. It was a clear night, so you could see some of the ships out in the water and oil rigs out there. And so this big fog comes rolling in, and it almost reminded me of the movie Fire in the Sky with Travis Walton, where you see that big, bright, glowing light where he encounters the craft in the forest. Well, same color light, this bright reddish orange light appears from this mist out in the water. And I say, Matt, you see this? I said, what is this? I said, look, it's clear, and all of a sudden this fog is way out in the distance, and this bright orange light comes, and then the fog and the bright light goes away, but the like really bright, but you can still see the orange glow. And it was really far away out in the water, so I actually had to do this with my hand and like look in to like get a fine viewpoint, because I didn't have binoculars or anything. And I said, do you see this? I said, this is what I'm talking about right here, Matt. I said, is this is a UFO. And so he's looking, he's like, oh, dude, that's crazy. What is that? And so we're looking at it, and this is a big disc craft. I mean, it was huge, massive. And so what happened, it was hovering above the ocean, and you could see lights spinning in this direction right here, and then the bottom light spinning in the opposite direction. And it was really golden amber in color, and it was hovering there. And all of a sudden, this blue beam came from the bottom and hit the water for just a split second, almost like someone turning on a light switch. And it stayed there for a second, and all of a sudden, this mist or fog came in, and that light got really bright, and then it went away. And so him and I got to experience that, and I just illustrated that for one of the interviews that I had with Dr. J. He asked for some things. But the funny thing about that experience is about 5 years later down the road, I had met another friend or acquaintance, I should say, that I never knew before. And I got to know him pretty well, and we went on a motorcycle ride up where my dad lives in Lake Elsinore, and he brought his motorcycles up there. But we went back to his house in Orange County, and we got on a weird topic about UFOs. And I had said, there was one day where I was in Laguna Beach, and me and my friend experienced this event, that drawing that I did. And he goes, no way, you're not joking, are you? He's like, I was in Laguna Beach, and me and my friends witnessed that same exact thing that I described to him. He was there the same night in a totally different location. I did not know him whatsoever prior to that, and he got to experience the same thing, which I found that was just oddly abnormal to be able to, like, that's like pulling a needle out of a haystack to know that another person saw the same exact thing from a different location in Laguna Beach and saw that, which was really crazy.
Do you recall ever seeing human children on board the craft?
Yes, I do. Some young kids in the same room with me, doing different things. Sometimes this one time we were in a room, and this female tall white entity was showing us this orb, and it would levitate in her hand, and it was like a toy. and she would show us how to be able to move it with our mind. And in fact, this is how the craft works. And I think this is how they were showing us these things, like this orb, how our thoughts and how we could direct our thoughts into moving that object, which what I've referred to call it is coherent thought sequencing, and where we have a clear and coherent thought and we think about that particular object or time and space or wherever it may be, we can direct that thought and use that. And maybe that's how I think that's a good majority of how the craft is moved and located, is they have this, I don't know how to use the correct term, but they can almost I don't think this is the right word, but like locate something through coherent thought, and that's how it is with doing CE5 contact. Is what I do is I meditate, I project myself as a light, and I visualize the area where I'm at, and I project that outwards. And then what happens is it acts as a signal, because what I've come to understand is we are a transceiver. We can transmit and also receive information. And so that was something that I was aware of when with kids in the room with us, as we would be together and we'd be looking at objects or moving or interacting with certain objects and stuff like that.
Could you talk about the like the medical instruments that you might have been in contact with or viewed?
Almost like a silver pin, just like a silver, almost like a test tube, but it's all silver, solid. It would project like a light of some sort, and they could look at your body as far as a scan point. A lot of the instruments were based off like a vibration or frequency type thing. They would emit a light, and they could scan your body in some instance. But and then also with that, there's what I've noticed in the craft is, like I was explaining earlier, like inside the craft is much bigger than what it is. There's everything is very natural and not like hard edges in the craft, and things tend to take form or shape that wouldn't necessarily be there. From what I experienced, like there wasn't just like a TV screen on a mount or anything like that. Like things would like shape. There was always this light that you couldn't see a light bulb or source, but there was a light emanating through in the ship. Very organic in nature, but metallic. I know when I do have experiences with the craft and stuff like that, that I feel like there is a knowing or a sense of presence within the craft itself, not just from the entities, but from the craft. I feel like it's aware of me and I'm aware of it.
Is there a story regarding the gray on that portrait behind you?
Yeah. So this right here is something that I watercolored. This is just one of the wise grays or entities that I would be in contact with. And this planetary body is just, I don't know if I've seen this before, or it just seemed like something that I would need to put into it. Um, but yeah, that is just a image of one of the wise grays that I have taken.
I'll be sharing with everyone some of your video captures regarding UFOs. Could you maybe talk about it briefly, what you saw and what you were able to capture?
These are just things like sometimes I'll just I usually in the morning is I'll just pray to source and God, and I also include them in my prayer. And sometimes I miss them and I don't get to see them, and I want to be able to have more physical experiences again, and I know that will happen in due time. But I just ask if they're doing okay, and if they have the time to come in and say hello, and when it's convenient for them. And uh, sometimes it's not answered right away. Sometimes it takes several days to a week for them to come in. And sometimes it's really immediate, but it may take a few hours. But they come in and just make themselves show themselves to me, and they'll appear in the sky, or may it be a dream state experience, or whatever they feel that is important to get my attention, or download or something like that. They'll just make my presence. And with the crafts, like I don't know when it happens. I just, like, it's not like, oh hey, you need to go outside right at this time. Like, they are just like you and I, and they can they have things going on all the time. They're doing things, and they'll make their appearance when they're ready and available.
Nathaniel, I'll be sharing with everyone a video of you capturing something at your front door. Could you
Yes.
explain what happened?
So that video capture is of my Ring doorbell that captured some motion. And the funny thing about that story is that was the second night of my daughter being home from being born. So my wife and I were downstairs with our daughter on the bed. We have moved our bedroom downstairs in our basement area to be close to our son and be with our daughter, so it didn't feel like he was being separate from us and his newborn sister. And so this we had that was the second night of her being home from after being born at the hospital. Um, my wife and I and my daughter were laying on the bed watching TV, and all of a sudden, our Ring doorbell just keeps going off. Like, just we keep getting alarms for motion up at the front door. And my wife's like, "Can you please go outside and see what's going on?" And I'm like, "Okay." But like at the corner of my eye, I could see this orb come into the downstairs basement where I'm seeing these things. And my wife's like showing me the phone. She's like, "Will you look out there? It looks like something's caught on the rain gutters of our house." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go check." And I'm like, "Well, I wonder if it's windy outside or there's weather or something like that." So, and it just kept going off and off. And I go to the front door. I open up the door. There's no wind, and this is in the summer. This is in April, so um, we are getting warmer temperatures. There's no wind or anything like that. I look around and I close the door. I walk back outside. I said, "There's nothing out there." Well, we start getting more motion, and she goes, "Can you please go outside and look on the rain gutters to see if something's either stuck on the rain gutters that's causing that to move, and can you remove it, or if there's something attached to our door?" So I say, "Okay." And this is where I know that there's something going on from what I see in the video feed. And I saw the orb, and so I start to get goosebumps, and I'm getting anxious as I go outside. I end up going back outside, and I walk outside and I grab my phone and I'm shining the light up on the for my flashlight on the phone up on the roof to see if there's anything up on the roof that's maybe swinging or anything like that. And nothing's on the door, stuck to the door, nothing stuck on the rain gutters or anything like that that could be triggering that alarm to go off. And I go back inside and I said, "There's nothing out there, hon. Everything's fine." And I knew what was going on, but again, like I emphasized before, my wife does not really like me talking so much about the my experiences and stuff like that. So um, I just kind of let it go at that. I know if you look in the video in the top, I'm trying to think, if I'm looking at my phone, it's in the top left-hand corner. You can see there's like this rectangular light structure and this thing waving it back and forth like this. And I had taken some screenshots. I don't know if you want to attach those, but I was watching the video and I was making screenshots on my video so I could better see it, but it's not full, it's almost semi-translucent, but in a solid state. And it appears to be an arm moving some type of rectangular object that illuminates light, and there's some bars that are going across. The further I scan the video, I notice that there's an orb that comes from the top right down into the basement area. And I think that, and it's very small, you have to really pay attention to it, but it goes into the ground. And I think it enters into our basement, and that's maybe where I saw the orb. But I think it was my entities that come by and check on me that have always been with me because and I didn't have it, I never had the Ring doorbell, plus it wasn't invented back in 2011 when my son was born, but I'm sure they had also came by and checked on him as well. But I think they were coming in there to assist in any way to make sure. And the cool thing about it is I've noticed with watching my children grow up is that, and if you have the opportunity to see an infant in its stage, you can actually see that it's here physically, but its spirit is also in between, uh, maybe heaven or a different place that it's been in, and so that they come into this existence, but they're not um, fully in the vessel yet. So they kind of go in and out, and that's why they rest a lot. They're doing two things at once. So. Had sent you an image of what you thought was an orb, but there's an actual entity that I kind of highlighted around. I don't know if you were able to better enhance that or whatever, but yeah, I thought that was.
Nathaniel, you sent me a drawing of what looks like a saucer UFO on a handkerchief with people inside. What's the story?
Yeah. So I was at work driving my bus, and I was at one of my end of line times where I start my next run. And all of a sudden, this visual image popped up like a memory, um, popped up, and I saw this thing of what had taken place with myself, and I just hurried and grabbed the closest thing I could illustrate what I visualized in that memory at the time, and that's kind of something that I just hurried, did a quick sketch, and what that is kind of, it's so hard to show like the formation or structure of inside a craft, like, and that's why I used like the lines to kind of show like curvature, but that's not, there's no lines in it, it's all solid. um, and there's a table, and I'm actually on the table, and there's extraterrestrial grays that are surrounding me on the table, but there's also two entities with have like a cloak or a robe on that are watching me, and it's a male and female. figure in there. It's just a part of my examination that took place.
Now, I know, Nathaniel, you're going to have to leave soon.
I have so much more to share. That's the
Really,
thing.
that's
Oh
amazing.
yeah. I
We'll
don't
have to
know
do a
if
part two, but
yeah.
just to finish off the interview, like, do you have a closing statement or perhaps a final story that you might want to get up?
My final statement is each and every one of us has a special gift, and that's why we're here on Earth. And let's make sure that we act in service to others. Right now, it's very important, and I can't overemphasize this, and I'm being told to share this, is that now is the time for experiencers like all of us to start being more involved. We need to be able to help assist people in going through these experiences. I've had a long time, 43 years of since my first physical interaction of dealing with this, since I'm almost 45, and it's taken me a long time to digest, understand, being involved in looking at what it is that we can do for the greater whole of society, our planet, for that when it comes time, because the time is coming to where we're going to integrate together. There's going to be more contact and known contact for people to be assured that, this is real. Yes, it's difficult sometimes. I think because there's energy changing in the planet and people are becoming more aware consciously that they are integrating into this new energy platform, so that they are going to be able to be more cohesive in the whole process of open contact, where it's not going to be panic, shock, and awe. There are still going to be individuals out there that are going to have a hard time and reject that. Some may not even be open to the experience because their perspective lens won't allow them to be that way because of their viewpoints. And so, for their protection, they may not even be introduced to the experience in its whole, because you have to understand that these entities and everything do not want to put harm or fear or anything in a state where it affects that individual in a negative fashion or a negative manner, because it's not conducive for that, and it also is not conducive for them to be involved in a situation where each party could be threatened in any way. We're not here to harm us, but we're definitely here to open up. So it is our time to come out more.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on. I feel humbled and very appreciative that you took the time to share with us your story today. Love it, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And again, there's just so much more I could share and emphasize on. So if you want to continue at a later time, I'd be more than happy to give some more information, because there's so much that I've experienced that I can share.
Thanks again, Nathaniel, for coming on. And to those watching, I hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.